Hey everyone, welcome to the sixth part in the PongGDX tutorial series. In this video, we're going to make an attempt to create the walls of the Pong arena along with creating a simple ball that floats in our arena space. So with that, let's jump in and make a few minor revisions first. So a few things that I noticed that might be good to clean up would be the public constructor of our game screen before we start doing anything else. You'll notice that I had originally set the projection matrix of the batch and shape batch in the public constructor. Now, if other screens were to follow the same behavior in our game screen manager, anytime we created a new screen and they set the projection matrix in their constructor, it would just override whatever the previous screen had set it to. So we're just going to take this and move it down into the more appropriate method of the show method for a screen. The show method is part of that life cycle that screens go through, where when a screen is set for your game application, it calls the show method, and when another screen is set, the screen that was currently visible gets hidden and calls its hide method, and then the new screen will call its show method. So it makes more sense to have this in our show method, so it sets the batches to render with respect to whatever screen they're working with once they're shown, not just in the constructor. Granted, we do call the set projection matrix in the update method, or we will, but at this moment, we're not really doing a lot of camera moving or anything, so it's not absolutely important because we also don't have any graphics or textures to render. So that's just a small modification we're going to make real quick. Also, we might be moving our world into the show method as well. However, because we only have our Pong area as the one box2D area to be shown, then keeping this world in memory doesn't hurt us too much, but it's still good to think about that we are setting up this world, and anytime we show this screen, it'll still have everything else that was left in it. So we may even just want to move this down, because if we keep showing the screen and setting the screen, that means the box 2D world will just keep calling all this stuff, and you'll see that we create a box every time the show gets called, and so that means the boxes will just kind of multiply over time anytime we enter this particular screen. So I think I'm actually just going to move this to the show method. That way, when we get into our game screen constructor, it'll just call it once it shows, and it'll give us a new world to work with. So with that, I believe those are all the small minor modifications I wanted to make. Keep in mind, I'm also keeping the camera initialization still in the public constructor. And that's because cameras are pretty lightweight. There's no reason to fret too much if you make a whole bunch of them. In fact, it's actually a good practice to use cameras for your HUD and for your game viewport. So like the more cameras you have to move around, the better. That way you don't have to create separate screens, which I believe there was some of the tutorial out there. I saw they were trying to use screens for the HUD part of the game, which you really shouldn't do. That's a little too much overhead. So keep in just something to note, like cameras are good. They're totally lightweight and you can do a lot with them. So with that, let's jump into the code. So from our previous video, we created our box 2D world and kind of got things basically set up. Just put a box in there and just made sure that we could enter this game state using our game screen manager, and once it loads up here, we'll see what we had. Okay, perfect. So we have our box and everything is good to go. What we want to do now, though, is we're going to be creating a bounding box around the edge of our screen. So pretty much the viewport, which is something key to note, is like the width and height that we see here. We want to make those the outermost wall areas. And The best way to do that without getting too complicated in PongGD is to use a chain shape. A chain shape is pretty much just a line that is connected, and you just use vertices to make points and like an X and Y coordinates, and you just kind of plot them around, and you can chain them together. So I'm going to use that to make the walls, and it'll allow objects to bounce off of them, or work with those lines as a bounding box by making them static. So they will act as walls or a container for us. If we just used one big box, anything we put at that X and Y inside that box, it would just kind of resolve or collision resolve and spring out anything. If we could also have another approach where we just use like 4 boxes outlining the perimeter of our arena, but I kind of want to get more to the point and just have lines. It just makes a little bit more sense because we don't need those boxes on the edges there. So with that, let's close out of here, and let's go down into our, or actually let's go to our PongGD bodybuilder. So we have this public static create body method, and we need to create a chain shape. This might get moved into the game screen because it's a little bit more involved and requires a camera, and we're doing something specific to the game screen, so we might actually put that in there. But since we're in the PongGD bodybuilder, let's create our pong ball, because that'll be really simple to set up, given that it's just going to use a circle shape, and yeah, that's pretty much it. No special properties or anything. So we're going to return a body. This is going to be called create ball, and just pass it in the world as usual. We'll give it a float X and a float Y, and then we'll also give it a float radius, and that's all we need. Okay, so we have body, kind of the common setup, and then return body, just so it stops getting mad at us. Well, I guess it will stay red. And then we have our body def, bdef equals new body def, bdef dot type equals body def dot body type. And this is going to be a dynamic body, which means it can move around. A static body just means it won't move and nothing can move it. Pretty much an unstoppable or immovable object for a static body. And a dynamic body can float around or be manipulated as we please. So bdef dot fixed rotation, we are going to set that to true, because if our ball is able to rotate, we'd probably get some weird angular velocity, and we don't really want that because it would affect our linear direction that we're trying to move in. And then we also want to set the position to .set x divided by ppm and y divided by ppm. Okay, and after that's done, we can do body equals world dot create body, bdef, good to go. Okay, and then now, instead of a polygon shape, we're going to take a circle shape. We'll call this shape also. That's going to be new circle shape, easy as that. And then for a circle shape, you just do set radius, and we'll take in the radius divided by 32, or I'm sorry, our pixel per meter factor. And then we will now move on to the fixture definition, kind of going through the 3 requirements for creating a body in a PongGD world. Fixture def, and fdef dot shape equals shape, and then fdef dot density equals 1.0 f, and I believe, is it in here? So we might be messing around with this restitution value. Restitution for a fixture definition is kind of like how bouncy something is. So we're going to be modifying that later once we get into actual game mechanic. But for now, we just want to make our objects, get our objects set up into our game world, and then start messing around with them and getting the physics right. So we'll hold off on that. But we can just do body.create fixture fdef and then shape.dispose. Okay, so we now have a reasonable create ball method that we can use. It's in our B2D bodybuilder, kind of like this static utility class, and we can go, or actually there was one thing that I forgot to add that was similar to our constants. This is just going to be private B2D bodybuilder, and just like I mentioned in the other videos, that's a private constructor because this is a static class. Nothing really needs to happen in here, and you shouldn't be able to create these. You shouldn't be able to instantiate a B2D bodybuilder because we just want this to work as a utility class for us, just to make things. Set code that is kind of similar, but anyway, so now that we have that, we want to get rid of this box. Let's replace this box with a ball, and we'll just rename it to ball, and box2d bodybuilder create ball, and we're gonna put it in the center also, and let's make it let me think, let's make it like 16. How does that work? Maybe see how big that is for us. Okay, well, that's actually huge. We might even go down to, I'd say, either 4 or 8. Let's try the middle of that. Let's try 6. So this is kind of the part where it takes a little bit of tweaking. You got to see what you're working with, and it always takes a little bit of time. Okay, well, that's a little bit more reasonable. It's a nice little pong-sized ball. We can work with that. And so now that we have a ball, let's get our chain shape set up. So we're going to come all the way to the bottom. Normally, I don't like to personally mix up all sorts of extra private methods within the lifecycle methods of a screen. I just normally go all the way to the bottom and start adding my private methods. That's just so you don't get this messy. These methods up here are exceptionally primary to the class, and they're used as very like high level methods. So we're going to throw all our stuff at the bottom. So private void, we're going to call it create walls. Okay, so for those of you who haven't seen any of my other Box2D tutorial videos, don't worry, I'll kind of try and step through this the best I can, but I haven't covered chain shapes very much in a lot of my videos. I think in my tiled map collision, I believe it was like a collision layer, when you go through and parse that into like a Box2D world, I think I talked about it briefly. So this might be a little bit new material, but because we're in our game screen class, we can just use our world and be a-okay. So we're gonna need a chain shape equals new chain shape. And you know, I probably didn't set this up the best way. There's probably a better way to do it, but for the most part, like, this will get the job done from what I've tested. And with chain shapes, they're a little bit different. So you do have a body definition, you do have a body you're still working with, but you get them set up in such a different way. It's more, I'd say, time consuming to figure out the vertices that you need to use, but to get into things, we're going to be using our camera, the viewport that our camera has, because it's set up to be the virtual width and virtual height of our screen, and so we can use those as points in how we set up our shape to get like the X and Y vertices that we're looking for. So you know, I'm actually going to change something out of my notes, and that's going to be, let's see, so I'll put the body at the top as we normally see, and then body def b def equals new body def. Okay, and the body def type, that is going to be a static body because it needs to be immovable. We don't want our ball moving our walls out and changing the arena. So we're going to make those static so they don't move. And then we can get into we can create our body equals new or world dot create body. And that's going to be bdef. Okay, so now we have our walls that we're going to be working with. And then for the chain shape, we need, let's see, we need to set up a vector2 array of vertices equals new vector2, and that's going to be 5 points. So if you think about it, for creating a box of lines or using lines, you have 5 points actually in order to complete the box. So you have the start position. We'll just kind of outline this method here. How about, so you have the start point, and then you have the top, or actually we'll go counterclockwise, yeah. So and then you have the top or the bottom rightmost point, so over here, and then you have the top rightmost point, so that's 3, and then the top leftmost point, that's 4, and then you have to connect it, and so that's your 5th point. So that's why we need to make it of size 5. We need to make sure it goes full circle. Otherwise, you'd only have kind of like a backwards C shape if we only had 4. So that's the part that kind of confuses people at first, is you need to make sure you're going like one step further. You always need to connect to the point you started with, and that's what gives you that extra vertice to work with. So verts 0 equals new vector2, and that's just going to be, it would be 0. You know, I'll just start at 0 for now, but I'll show you guys why I will probably change that here in a second. Then verts1 equals new vector2, and then that's going to be camera.viewport width divided by ppm. Remember, anytime you're putting using numbers, converting from screen units to world units, you divide by ppm. And then verts2 equals new vector2 camera.viewport width, and that's divided by ppm, and then that's going to be camera.viewport.height divided by ppm. Okay, so now as you can kind of see, we have 0, 0, and then we have 1, 0, and then we have 1, 1, and then there's going to be 0, 1, and then 0, 0 again. And I say 1 just as not, just kind of relative like coordinate or corners. So verts 3 equals new vector2 camera dot, or actually, sorry, that should be 0 divided by ppm, and that'll be something that will change, and that's going to be camera.viewport height divided by ppm. Then verts 4, the final point, kind of making that full circle, completing things, we have to go back to 0, 0. Okay, so with that, we now have our vertices set up with all 5 of the points we need, making that chain shape that we're looking for. And then we do the thing that we normally do with Box2D bodies, and we have the fixture. So we can do a shorthand way with just create fixture and pass it the shape and a density. And then we can do shape.dispose, as we need to make sure to dispose of the data that the shape is using. But we have that set up, but there was one thing that we missed. So we have our vectors set up, and we also need to have our shape.create chain, and that's where you pass it the verts. Okay. And so with that, I believe that should be everything we need. So we make our body, make sure it's static. We have our chain shape. We set up our vertices that the chain shape will work with, and then we create the chain shape with those vertices, and then we create the fixture, so that's like putting it into the world, giving that body a shape, and then we dispose of the shape. So yeah, that should be everything. So let's, let me see, let's call that method, that should be in show. So we're gonna wanna create those walls first. So we'll do create walls, and that should run through and create all that for us. And so let's run it real quick and see what we get. We might not be able to see anything on the left and topmost sides, I believe. Yep, and that's the one thing I was going to talk about. So you'll notice we can see these lines here, these green lines. Hopefully you guys can see it. But that is the chain shape that we just made. So now to get into that fix that I was talking about. In order to get it that 1 pixel over, it's because we're putting it on the absolute 0 spot and the camera isn't really catching that. It's not in view. I just kind of put it in 1 over, and that way we can at least see the whole arena. I do that just because I want to see it personally. And then for the height, you just do -1 and -1. Okay, if we run it one more time, that 1 pixel difference will allow us to see the entire arena where we want it. And there we go. So now we can see all 4 sides of our chain shape, and we have created our walls and a ball in the center of our arena. So with that, hopefully guys were able to follow along without any problem. If there's anything that needs to be explained, leave it in the comments below. I believe that's all I want to take care of in this video. And in the next video, we'll start throwing our ball around the arena just to kind of see how it moves and also get our first paddle set up. So with that, I hope you guys enjoyed the video and see you next time.